Tonight we spoke about Rivka, our matriarch, and of course the famous story of how Eliezer knew she was the right one because of her absolute kindness. We all know the story, but what's going on here? Why did Eliezer create such a ridiculous, intense act of kindness as a sign that this is the right woman? And what does that have to do with us? If you enjoy and know someone who can benefit, please share your act of kindness. And if you can, please subscribe.
I was looking at the Torah portion, the Parsha, and saying, all right, lots of amazing, beautiful things, but wanted to find something relevant to us, something we haven't spoken about that really we could focus on. So in this portion, this week's portion is Chayei Sara, Eliezer goes to find a wife. Now, he was not the first matchmaker that we know of in history. He was not a shadchan. He was the first emissary. He was the first shliach. And what's a shliach? So according to Jewish law, a shliach means someone totally nullified to a sender, and also someone who's independent. So we see this in Eliezer because he was totally nullified to a sender. Because Avram was the principal. Avram was the sender. Avram determined the mission. Get a wife for my son from my family. That was Avram's mission. That wasn't Eliezer. We're told Eliezer had a daughter and he was thinking, oh, this would be such a nice match. Avram said, no, from my family. So he was completely nullified. No game, no tricks, nothing, not straight. Avram wants a wife for his son from his family. He put what he wanted on the side. Forget about that vision. I don't know what happened to Eliezer's daughter. Hope she got a nice shidduch, but it wasn't Yitzchak. He went completely nullified, completely dedicated to find a wife for Yitzchak from Avram's family as Avram wanted. At the same time, Jewish law says a shliach, an emissary, has to be completely nullified to the sender and also has to have independence. And we definitely see that with Eliezer because he had to use a lot of resources, especially if you learn this portion and you learn all the midrash on it. There was a lot going on there. He had to use a lot of his own initiative and his own intellect to figure out how to fulfill this mission. But one thing we see very clearly in the verses is that he prayed. When he got there, when he got to Haran, when he got to Besuel, Avram's relative here, Avram's cousin, he davened, he prayed, and he made a sign. He created a very interesting sign. Now, this sign has nothing to do with Abraham. Avram didn't make up this sign. Avram didn't tell him to make a sign. This has nothing to do with Abraham. This is Eliezer as shliach, as emissary, nullified to Avram's will, but independently figuring out how to do that will. And he wanted a sign from God. He didn't want to make no mistakes here. He wanted a sign to make sure that this girl would be the right woman to marry Yitzchak and to build the Jewish people. Because this was the first Jewish marriage. The first Jewish marriage was Yitzchak and Rivka. So this is the mother of what's going to be the Jewish people. What was his sign? Of course, we all know the story. The interesting sign, he said, I'm going to ask this girl, whatever girl I think is the right candidate, for a drink of water. I'm standing by the well. And she's going to say, drink, and I'll even give water to give all your camels to drink. Now, I mean, of course, we all know the story. But if you think about the story, it's a real interesting story. And it's real interesting what Eliezer is doing here. He was asking for a lot. I checked in the verse. He had 10 camels. That's a lot of water and camels. And he had a lot of servants with him. He came representing the mega wealthy Abraham. That's what he needed 10 camels for, to get one girl. He had to, display the wealth. So to get one girl, I'm bringing 10 camels and a lot of servants. So obviously, he had plenty of people that could give water to his camels. So what would you think if someone asked you something along those lines? A modern day, if someone could create for us a modern day alternative to this idea, And remember, the sign Eliezer made is not that he's going to ask her, "Can I have water? By the way, can you give water to my 10 camels and all my servants? Give water to all my 10 camels." He's not going to ask her. She's got to dream that one up on her own. What would you think if something like that happened in your life? Has anyone ever experienced something like this? Someone asking for such a favor, if we could sort of figure out what it would mean to give water to 10 camels, or not asking, but intimating, or not intimating, but on your own, you're supposed to figure it out that there's a need here. And I've got to step up to the plate for this need. Anyone was ever in that situation? Step away from camels and water. We don't know how to give water to camels, how we could envision this. Well, no one's really thinking of something, which maybe means no one was ever in such a situation, or you forgot, or you're not equating it. But someone asking you for a favor, a big favor, when seemingly it wasn't a necessary favor. He's got servants. He's got camels. He brought servants. Or he wasn't even asking the favor. He was intimating. He wasn't intimating. Somehow you're supposed to figure it out. Eliza?
I don't know if it equates or not, but I remember my first.
It equates to giving water to 10 camels. But
well, yeah, I just can't exactly think in terms of those lines, but I had my first self-contained classroom. I had first started teaching. I was taking my class on a field trip. And the way that it works, in most schools, you can fit 2 classes on a bus. And so the school, of course, wants to put 2 classes on a bus. So I invited another teacher to join me on the field trip and to share the bus. She asked me, because I had, and keep in mind, the ratio of teacher to student is in proportion to the challenge of the students. So if my classroom was myself and 4 assistants for 10 children, then it meant there was 1 adult for every 2 students. So it meant they needed that. And I had backup plans, like if this one had a seizure, or if that one had a meltdown, if this one had, and so this other teacher on the bus asked me, she said, "Tell me, would you please take 1 more student? Would you take 1 of mine?" And so I can't say this is 10 camels at all, but I remember looking at her and saying, "I don't really know her. She does." And she said, "Oh, she's quiet." Sure, she was quiet. She was a selective mute, or she was mute. And whether it was selective or not, I'll never know. But and she said, "And here are her diapers. Here are her this. Here are her that. Here are her," and I just remember it was my first year there, feeling uncomfortable to say no. And I said yes. And it was the only time in my life that I thought, that's it. I'm instantly losing my teacher's license. The Chicago police are going to have to be called, because as soon as the dolphin show was finished in the oceanarium, I counted my 10 students and I made sure that I had all of them, and we left, and I forgot this number 11. And so of course it wasn't until we were in front of the beluga whales that I realized that I was missing this extra child.
Quiet child.
And so, because I realized I'm carrying this extra bag of diapers and they belong to her. So of course I ran back, I set everyone in a circle, and I couldn't find her, and they alerted security. They closed down all the doors to the entire Shed Aquarium. And they let me know when I described her, and I just started crying because I described what she was wearing. She's wearing, a school shirt, said Esperanza. But when I said, she won't answer if you call her, and she won't even look if you call her. And that's where I just started crying, thinking, oh my God, what was I thinking saying yes? So
I think I'm going to stop you here, because the point you're saying, and I think it could be, especially with the drama of how you're saying it. So when you were asked that by the teacher, you felt sort of very put upon, very like, what in the world is this lady doing to me? But you sort of felt, we'll call it guilty, or you didn't know how to say no because that wasn't in your training. So you sort of said yes, and then got stuck with it. And this was many years ago, and I can hear it was still a very traumatic. So
yes,
exactly. So that was Eliza's version of the story, which is sort of what I would expect in such a situation. But it's really interesting that this is the sign Eliezer is making to find the wife for Yitzchak. This is his sign. And it happened within minutes, within less than minutes, within seconds. Because the verse says clearly, before he even finished his prayer, there she was. And he knew it was the one, because as she came to the water rose to greet her. And then she did everything. Like, oh, of course. And oh, can I give water to your camels? Like, I'd love to do that. I want to focus on this idea. And again, I know we know the story and there are books about it, kind Rivka. But I thought it was really interesting, especially if you think about it in terms of like practical reality, to really understand that this is a very extreme thing he was. And this again didn't come from Abram. Abram didn't give him any signs. Abram just said, go get a wife for my family. This was his sign. So obviously we understand, well, he wanted to make sure she was a kind girl. Interesting as the world, he wasn't a matchmaker, but he was pretty close to a matchmaker. He's the first quasi matchmaker we know of. I thought it was very interesting, I guess because I have a number of children in that situation in life. So I thought it was, okay, this is something for me to file away in my memory banks, that this is what he was checking for. He wasn't checking if she was outgoing, popular, intelligent, a good cook. He wanted to make sure this woman is extremely kind. Why do you think that's what he was looking for? And in such an extreme fashion, not just kind, self-sacrificing kind, putting herself aside kind. She did it, and she did it on her own. It wasn't like in Eliza's story where she maybe also did something that made no sense, but she was put upon. The teacher asked, maybe the teacher was older, I mean, seniority. She sort of felt she had no choice. Here, he didn't even ask. Definitely room to say no. His servants definitely could and should have done it. And this is what Eliezer said is the sign that this is the wife. Gina, what are your thoughts?
Something that I just heard this morning that's like really coming up, it reminds me of this, is I was speaking with someone about, I was giving tzedakah and I was speaking with him, and he said what he works on is like to not wait to say yes, just have it be an instant yes, because if you wait, your Yetzer Hara will find way. Like, for example, someone said they needed a washer dryer, theirs was broken. It's like, no problem, I'll swipe, here's a new one. And he said, like, if I waited, I would have said, okay, maybe they could use a neighbor, we'll find a better deal, we'll find the cheapest one, the one that fits, whatever. But and then it just like, there's all this opportunity to say no. So like that instant, just like automatic yes, and doing it is like, it was him breaking his midos and like trying to just it be automatic for him. So like when I think of what you're saying with this situation, I'm thinking of like, it doesn't sound like she, unless mistaken, like it doesn't sound like she really asked questions or like, why do I need to do this? Or like, why are you, like it's.
The other didn't ask her. She said, oh, I'd love to water those plants also.
Like it
so
seems like it was
just like this
automatic.
Person, you're nurturing a very, it's interesting. The Torah or our sages say that we should be so saturated by serving God that when we hear the words modim, we bow. And similarly, that our hand naturally stretches out to give to someone else, which would imply, even before they ask, in whatever situation, like the Jewish hand stretches out, just like the Jewish body bows to serve God, the Jewish hand stretches out. And what you're saying about the person you were talking to is interesting to me because it reminds me of some tzaddik Rebbe. I don't remember who, I don't remember the name, I don't remember the context, but I remember his thing, which is probably not the best way to express it, is he would never go to sleep at night if there was any money in his house. Like any money in, money out. Now we of course all know the concept of money in, money out, but by him it meant something a little different. Money in was whatever people came all day and they wanted his blessings and this and that, private audiences, that was the money in. Money out is all the people that came and said, I'm desperate, I have this situation, I have this situation. And he couldn't go to sleep at night if there was money in his house. He's like, no, I'm doing something wrong if there's money in my house. Money out. Or another, I don't know if it was the same person or someone else. I don't remember this one either, but there's some situation with him. Maybe he asked his son, a very large money he was giving to someone for charity. And his son questioned, not that his father was giving his charity, it might have been the same person. He knew money in, money out. It wasn't going to stay in the house. But he was like, such a large sum for one person? And his father said, if again, this might or might not have been the same person. His father said, when this person came with this need, I right away thought, oh, I have this amount of money, whatever, this very large amount of money I happen to have in my house. It must have come in today. And I thought, oh, I'll give it to him. And then I had a second thought. And my second thought was, give so much to one person. Of course, I'm going to give it all away. But maybe I should divide it among the next 5 people that come and ask me. And then I said to myself, that was the second thought I had. It was to take away from the first one. The first thought was pure. He needs money? Unbelievable. I have this money. Give it to him. And then when I had this thought, wait, maybe it's smarter to divide the money and give it to the next 5 people. I know that's not coming from a holy place. Now, obviously, if he had done it that way and taken all the money and given it to 5 people, it would have been holy and it would have been beautiful and it was amazing and it was pure. But still, the fact, which is sort of, I think, reminiscent of what Dina's saying, that he was like, that's my second thought. That's my thought that's cooling me off from my first thought. That's making it a little more cold, a little more calculated. No, that's not coming for him from a holy place. Maybe for us that would have been from a holy place, but for him that wasn't from a holy place. So that's Dina's ideas, which I think very much resonates. Someone else? Why do you think this was Eliezer's sign? Why do you think he was thinking the wife for Yitzchak, the mother of the Jewish people? This is the trait I'm looking for. Eliza?
If his midah was chesed, then it seems that he was looking for someone who would match qualities of the home.
Who fit into the family.
Yes.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Makes perfect sense. She fits into the family. Anyone else? Any other ideas? Why? This is actually what the Torah says, what the Talmud says, are the characteristics of a Jew. So it says in the Talmud that we have 3 characteristics of a Jew. Baishanim. Baishanim means people that are naturally embarrassed, if you will, sensitive. Rachmanim, people that are naturally compassionate. And Gomlei Chasadim, people that naturally do good deeds. Now it's interesting because in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe quotes this. Baishanim, the fact that we're embarrassed of our wrong, that's actually not a natural Jewish trait. Jews actually are naturally chutzpahdik. That's the natural Jew in the raw, his chutzpah. So how does the Talmud say we're baishanim? We're have this busha, this embarrassment, this sensitivity, comes from our interaction with Torah. The more we interact with Torah, it refines us and, wipes away some of our natural chutzpah that we all have in mega doses, and we can become baishanim. But rachmanim, compassionate, and gomlei chasadim, doers of good deeds. These are the traits of the Jew. This is the natural trait of every single one of us. If you don't have this trait, you're not Jewish. It's very interesting. There's a story in the Talmud, actually. This is the source behind this, of a collector, as we call them, a shulach. They existed in those days also. So this mashulach in the times of the Talmud was traveling. He was probably from Israel. The Jews were incredibly poor. And he was in Babylonia, in Babel, where the Jews had money. And he would collect the money and bring it back to the Jews in Israel. Sounds familiar. And he went to a town, and he went from door to door, and not one person gave him any money. Not one Jew in the entire town gave him money. And he said, and obviously he wasn't just a Mashiach, must have been holy enough to be quoted in the Talmud. He said these people aren't Jewish. They're not Jewish. A Jew has compassion. A Jew naturally does good deeds. Now, the Alter Rebbe explains this in Tanya, and I think it's interesting, this point. When we're told that Jews are compassionate and Jews do good deeds, Jews do deeds of kindness, that doesn't mean ultra-Orthodox Jews. That doesn't mean spiritual, holy Jews. It means every single Jew. Even Jews that don't listen to their godly soul, even Jews that don't keep kosher on Shabbos. Every Jew by nature is compassionate and loves to do kindness. And I think we see that. We don't have to be a big believer. We see it in our world. All of these huge Jewish national funds and all this support for Israel. The mega bucks aren't coming from Orthodox Jews that know they have to give Meiser. Coming from unaffiliated Jews. From Jews that are not doing it because they know they have to put a check on their chart that they gave their charity. Why do these Jews give so much money? Because that's the nature of a Jew. It's not the nature only of our godly spark. It's not coming necessarily, it could come from our godly aspect, obviously, but it doesn't have to. Even the animal of a Jew, the animal soul of a Jew, the base part of a Jew, this is our heritage. We're soaked in this. Look who we all came from. This is Rivka. The most basic, non-godly nature of a Jew is to give, is to be compassionate, is to be charitable, is to want to help someone else. Now, obviously, if you're more godly and more holy, and then it's also coming from your godly soul, and it's also coming from your relationship to God and from understanding all the reasons to give charity, of course. But even if you don't know any of that, and you're not thinking about any of that, and you have no interest in any of that, you're a Jew, you're a giver. You're a Jew, you're compassionate. You're a Jew, you want to help. And if you're not like that, we question your Judaism. We seriously question your Judaism. If this is so definitive of us, even on our most base animal soul level, again, it's not necessarily we're in a godly space. It's good to reflect on this trait on our personal scorecard. So let's look at this test sign that Eliezer devised.